Hello again, gamers and gamettes, and welcome to another episode of Not So Hardcore Gaming. I'm your host, Jeremy, and today we're talking about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And as he is the one who told me all about this, and the one I bought the game disc from, we have Blaze on the channel once again.
Hello everybody, how you doing today?
Thank you for coming on today.
That's okay, I'm excited to be here.
With all that said, let's get straight into it, and we'll start with, as always, visuals and audio. Now, before we do start, I would like to briefly mention Assassin's Creed Valhalla came out on PlayStation 5 as well as PlayStation 4, so it was designed, I believe, to be for the PlayStation 5, but being brought down to PlayStation 4, some of it didn't end up quite as smooth, quite as beautiful as it would be on PlayStation 5. And the way we've both played it is on the PlayStation 4, so the two versions will differ slightly. But to start it off, visuals will pretty much always be the very first thing you notice. That's usually before you get much of the music coming in. And the views that you have throughout the game are spectacular. The way that the game especially will have a difference between snowy areas as well as green, lush areas. If you go to the right spot, you can look right where the border is, and it's one of the most beautiful sights I've seen in any video game.
It is very beautiful for a game that was downgraded for an earlier console. It still performs and looks very well. It's not like, Cyberpunk that, you get on the PlayStation 4 and it doesn't work, or I'm trying to think of another one. No, it was on the top of my head. But you know what I mean? Like it still looks, feels, it still looks great. There's some areas I thought to myself this would look much better on PlayStation 5. Like
yes.
there's one scene where you're at a funeral and the leaves are sort of floating, or the flowers are sort of floating instead of actually sitting on the casket. And I sort of thought, on the PlayStation 5 they would be sitting on the casket, it would look much better. But I didn't take points off it for that because it wasn't made for the console I'm trying to play it on.
Yeah, for me, I was always keeping in mind that this was designed for PlayStation 5, but I had noticed actually quite a lot of textures, like textures of certain rocks, where it looked very blurry, very, I don't know, it looked like an earlier console version on a lot of different textures you would find throughout the game. And just as you've said, I couldn't really let that alter my opinion of it, because obviously I always try to be understanding of a lot of these limitations, so to speak, and I couldn't bring myself to take points off it for that. Getting into the audio, the music, I never really noticed music as much. Do you? Do you have anything to say about music?
I didn't notice any game soundtrack from it. It's like there was obviously music, but I don't think I ever really
took note of it.
When you run around, you're sort of listening to the nature instead of the music. Like it's not like Assassin's Creed 2 where you run from one area to the other and you got the soundtrack in the background. I think the only time I ever really used music was when you were like, I don't think you used music at all.
Yeah, it's sort of.
That's
not to say it had no soundtrack, but it didn't stand out as much.
But that's okay. For me, personally, I prefer the sound of the nature, the leaves crumbling under your feet, the dogs barking in the background, It was more, you were more aware of your surroundings because you could hear things coming, and they did that very well. It was like, you could hear a wolf howl before it reached you, and you're like, okay, cool, the wolf's coming. Whereas if the soundtrack was there, I always got confused with whether it was the song, the soundtrack track, or if it was actually in the game itself. And without the music, I found it was much easier to interpret things. You know, wolves, boars, bears, other enemies.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, I prefer for there to be a little bit less music, just when you're running around normally. With the audio, I would like to mention a small detail which I really, really enjoyed about it. For a lot of the armor you get, and I will get into armor as a category in a bit, when you come to your helmet, you can either have a helmet or a mask. And when you wear a mask, it muffles his voice.
It does. I actually never used a mask, so I didn't.
Yeah, it's just a little bit. It's not really noticeable. Like, you can still hear him talking clearly, but it does sound a little bit muffled for his voice coming out and that. And that, to me, is a detail which, if they didn't put it in, you could kind of understand it. But having it in there really added a lot of character to it.
I always had the helmet there because it added the stats. But then I clicked the hide feature, so you can hide the helmet. I was running around with no helmet on, like, most of the time.
I didn't really do anything with that until later in the game. But yeah, it's sort of, I really love the detail for that, and that's something I don't really see in many other games. So that was one thing I wanted to mention for the audio, was such a beautiful detail to it. I think that just about does it for visuals and audio.
There's a lot of small details, like, you know, at the start of the game, you get attacked by that wolf. You can still see the scars on his neck when you run around naked. You know, the different, whenever you change his hair, it always waved differently, or his beard always waved differently.
That is a good point, yeah.
The tattoos weren't splotchy, they weren't square, they were actually nice and round, and it looked very well done and designed.
And the sheer number of customization options, that
awesome.
It really lets you add a lot of character to him, because obviously he's got like the same character himself, but you get to put your own flair on it, and that's always a good thing.
I just want to point out, we played as male Eivor, not female Eivor.
Yes, that is a good thing to mention.
I was a little disappointed with the limitation of hair and beard. I felt like they could have added a few more different kinds instead of just like 4 different kinds with different colours. It added up, you know, to 16 different, but they were the same, but with different colours, if that makes sense. And if they could have added so many more different styles of beards, beads, you know, braids, that sort of thing, like, and different Viking hairstyles than just, you know, the long ponytail undercut and a couple of long hair with beads. Like, it just didn't. It could have been done a bit better. That's the only one. The only customization downfall I had was that the hair was very limited. The facial hair and head hair was very limited. And as someone who hid the helmet so that you could see the hair flowing, I was a little disappointed with that. Very disappointed with
that. That does make some sense. As for me, for a lot of it, I didn't really have his hair showing. I mostly wore a helmet, because for a good lot of time, I didn't know you could hide the gear. So it didn't affect me quite as much. But yeah, having more customization options is always better. I found I wasn't too disappointed with it, but I can see why you would be. I think that just about does it for visuals and audio, so let's move on. Next up, we'll have gameplay. Now, I would like to first of all start, the button layout for the game I found was done very well. I had no complaints with it, and I was, I never found it difficult to get a hold of it. In saying, I would like to first mention, I haven't played all the Assassin's Creed games, and most of the ones I played were older, where to attack you were using your squares, and triangles. I never really... I think Unity may have used the bumpers and triggers. I
That's a
think.
long time ago. I don't even remember.
But out of the ones I've played, Unity, I think, is, aside from Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the newer one of the games that I had. So that was the newest Assassin's Creed game I played before Valhalla. And seeing how much the controls have changed was quite interesting for me. And I found it's perfect now. Like it was done very, very well.
I did like the button layout. I liked that if you had a second weapon, it didn't double your stats, and he didn't use it unless you did the endurance attack, where you hold down the block button and you just use a big mirage of attacks, and it was awesome. I really liked that aspect. I just liked the whole combat system itself. I didn't have to spend a lot of time dodging, which I'm not a big fan of dodging unless it's a Soulsborne game, so Dark Souls or Bloodborne. I didn't spend a lot of time dodging. I was just straight brute force, take as much damage as I need to, but kill them as quick as I can, sort of thing.
I really enjoyed the parrying system. Well, once I got the hang of that, I found a lot of the time, because I really enjoy the stun finishes as well, you get some real brutalities with that, which was another part I really enjoyed. But being able to parry, I found finding the right timing to get used to it to begin with was really, really fun for me. And I would find myself there standing and waiting for them to attack and just keep parrying until I could stun finish them.
I never used the parry. I mean,
No, you're not the type to.
The only time I used the parry was when you had to at the start, when it was doing like tutorials. Other than that, I never used the parry.
Yeah, you're definitely a brute force type of guy.
I am very brute force. I just like games where you can be brute force, and this is one of them games where you can just load up on heavy weapons and you just go. You ruin everything, and it's awesome. Awesome.
To also go a bit further into the gameplay, we'll also talk about weapons and armor at the same time, because it really does change the gameplay quite a bit. You have your different core weapons, you've got your axes, a hammer, you've got spears, and you've got flails are the main ones, and I've used all of those.
And you got great swords and big bearded axes as well.
I never found myself using the heavy weapons. I liked to go with the lighter weapons. And so I mained with those 4 different ones.
I was that person that had a great sword in one hand and an axe in another. Like real overkill. And not just like not a little axe, like a full bearded axe. Like it was
the double heavy weapons.
Yeah. I did that. I did that for a while until I sort of got sick of, all the slow attacks. So I switched up. I used dual axes, or when I finished, I was using Gungnir in one hand and Mjolnir in the other hand.
For me, I found once I unlocked Mjolnir, I was using that a lot. That was the first hammer I really used.
I actually never got a hammer until like really late in the game, when I got it from one of them cargo boxes, and I was like, wait, there are hammers? Like, I didn't even know.
I had one that I got quite early on, which was the blacksmith's hammer. But I never used it because its stats were pretty crappy. But then when I unlocked Mjolnir, I was using that a lot just because, holy crap, you're using Mjolnir. That was awesome.
I'm going to be honest, I didn't like Mjolnir. It was very nerfed. It was way too nerfed to be a godly weapon. It had that one random big burst of lightning, and that was about it. That was the only good thing about it. If I'm honest, completely honest in my opinion. Gungnir really showed its way as a godly weapon. You doubled the length you could attack, which was great. Stats were great. I really like, and same with Excalibur. Excalibur was so nerfed.
I never actually unlocked Excalibur yet.
Definitely do it. Can you figure out how nerfed it is?
Yeah, definitely will. I think part of the reason I enjoyed playing Mjolnir so much is if you wear Thor's armor, it boosts the amount of stun you do and speed. So I was wearing full Thor's armor using Mjolnir, and that I think really greatly increased the amount of stun you could do, and that's why I enjoyed it so much. So for me, it didn't feel as nerfed, and I was getting a lot of those electricity. Like, you get the bursts of lightning which stuns them. I was getting that a lot, and it looked cool, it felt cool, and I think it was just designed very well.
I didn't like Thor's armor in general. Like, I didn't like the look of it.
For me, when it came to his armor, first of all, I was quite disappointed that certain armor pieces you got were the second lowest quality. Like, the boots, I think, when you got them, they were bronze quality, and that just, it didn't feel right for the armor of the gods. Literally, the armor of the gods.
It should have really had its own sort of genres, really. Like, you had,
you
had fine, superior, and then, like, I think it was mythical. And and then really Thor's armor, Gungnir, Mjolnir, and Excalibur should have had, like, a god rating instead.
Yeah, I think it would have been good to have, like, just another one. And when it comes to some of that armor as well, I kind of wish you had the option to, when you upgrade it, it changed a little bit. Like, I think a lot of the gods were quite big on gold. And then when you have Thor's armor, there's not a trace of gold anywhere.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see, a bit more flair, so to speak.
Well, he comes from Asgard, the realm of gold, the realm of gods. It had to be gold. And I was happy with the design of Mjolnir and Gungnir because they are gold. But the armor, I was so disappointed.
I think it could have been done better, but in the end, when you upgraded it fully, its stats were good enough for me. I was happy to use it, and I think I used it mostly for the extra boosts you got. But towards the end of it, I actually hid his cloak as well as Thor's helmet, and so it looked a bit more basic, and I found it looked better to me doing that. Which actually brings me to another detail which I thought was quite cool. If you hide his cloak, but then you have to put your hood up to hide your identity, it would show up there. It didn't just keep it invisible still. It would click back into existence basically as it looked. But then as soon as you removed it, it went invisible again.
I did like that, yeah.
It was a very good detail for me. As it's the weapons and armor, which we got into the visuals of it for a bit, so I do apologize for that. When it comes to the different types of weapons, I think there was quite a good amount to it, and for a while, and I quite surprised myself with this, about a little bit through the game, I came across a boss battle that I couldn't win for a while, and then I equipped the flail, and I thought, okay, just something ain't working, so I'll try that, and I chopped up, and so I got a new appreciation for the flail just as a general weapon. And I used that for a while, but then I moved back to axes, and then I moved to Mjolnir for a while. But the way that the gameplay changed and his attacks varied so much, I really enjoyed just how well that was designed. I think it was done very, very well. And obviously, as I said, you have to do that. You have to change the gameplay fairly significantly, otherwise it just feels wrong,
I didn't really change my weapons. I was disappointed with the lack of options, as I was with the hair and beard. I liked how I played Odyssey. I didn't like in Odyssey how you had a different weapon or piece of armor for each. Like, you kill someone, you get a new piece of armor, like every time, and it sucked. Because I'd have 4,000 bits armor, and I'd be like, why? It didn't make sense. And then coming to this one, they reduced that, which was good. I really appreciated them reducing it, but it was reduced a little too much, and you didn't really get much option.
One thing I will say, which I was really disappointed about, in the base game, there were no swords. that, like, you've got great swords, but there were no one-handed swords. That annoyed me quite a bit. You know, first of all, I love swords in a lot of games that you come across, and swords were a very popular weapon during the Viking era. You'll be able to attest to that.
Yeah, they did use a lot of swords. They used more axes than anything. That's why they're so famous for their hand axes. But a lot of Vikings used swords as well.
I think I've heard it was like the second most popular weapon aside from axes.
It was second to third because they used a lot of spears as well. But they were big, and it should have been in the base game. We shouldn't have had to wait till Wrath of the Druids. Was that there were Siege of Paris?
Siege of Paris introduced a few. There was also an event that you had for a while, which you could get a sword, but the fact that you had to wait so long just didn't feel right. Swords, I think, should have been in there, the one-handed swords, and not having them there, I was really disappointed because, especially, you see a lot of enemies use swords. A lot of them will use their swords, and the fact that you yourself couldn't get one was really disappointing to me. And because I have yet to play the DLCs for it, I never got a sword. There just was no way for me to get a sword, and that just didn't feel right to me. So, yeah, I said that I think was one of the most disappointing things throughout the game, and there isn't that much to be disappointed about with this game. But that was one of them. So yeah, as like the options, they didn't seem. It wasn't like they were limited to me. I think, you know, there could have been a few more options, but the swords specifically.
They needed swords, and they needed more option in the sense of axes and shit. Like, it just didn't have enough. It was better than Odyssey, where Odyssey had too many, but it should have met in the middle and gone like. And I guess that's what they can do. What Ubisoft can do for the next game is when they come out with Assassin's Creed, you know, blah blah blah. They can go, okay, well, there's not enough in Valhalla, too much in Odyssey. Let's go in the middle.
Yeah, you learn from your mistakes, basically.
Definitely, and I'm excited for that. I'm excited because hopefully they learn a lot from the mistakes of this game and their previous games.
Yeah, and I think that's part of really life in general. But yeah, it's sort of. And the thing I did think later towards, a lot of people were upset that you couldn't have swords. So Ubisoft fixed that. They obviously couldn't add a lot in because the game was mostly finished anyway. But the fact that they added some in, I think, was quite good because they were listening to their fans. And that's something every game company needs to do. So they did sort of try to not necessarily fix, but try to work with their fans, which is something that you don't see often enough.
No, not at all.
So yeah, that's really most of what we have to talk about gameplay, and then weapons and armor, because we've mentioned that quite a bit. When it comes to weapon and armor, the last thing I would like to say I quite enjoyed was most of the weapons that you upgrade, they will change what they look like. And I very much like that detail. You know, they obviously, like, not all of them changed, but most of them would change just a little bit, like just to add that extra little bit of flair. And that's what I think did quite well. You know, having the attack increase is an obvious thing, but having things change a little bit is a greatly appreciated detail.
Definitely.
We'll now move on to the story. Now, the story for this, admittedly, I must not be the smartest person, because for a while I couldn't figure out how to progress the story. It wasn't until I spoke with Blaze where I was saying, like, I couldn't figure out how to do it, and he's like, oh, you just got to do the alliances. I was like, and facepalmed. But once I get that tip to say, that's how you progress the story, I found I very much enjoyed how the story progressed. You leave Norway, you go to make a name for yourself, and you develop a lot of good relationships with the people you come across. And, you forge alliances, and that's what you need to progress.
I was really happy that you could choose in which order you did most of your missions. I really enjoyed that. That was that was great. I love that.
It's an important thing to be able to take things at your own pace, do things your way in any game. And a lot of the games where you will come across, you have to do things in a certain order, you can feel a bit trapped. But with this, you could do it in any order, provided you had the skill to back it up, because you needed higher levels to be able to complete things. But if you had the skill to back it up, you could still do it as a lower level. And that, I think, added a lot to the game.
The one issue I had was some of it just got repetitive. Run here, go here, collect this, collect that, do this, do that, talk to this person. Like, it did get very repetitive mission-wise. And the only issue I had was I played the game on PS4 before most of the fixes came out, and I got stuck before one boss battle, and I was 100 hours in to the game, and I was keen. I was only halfway through, 100 hours, sweet, and then I couldn't progress because the game was rooted. And then, I waited 3 months for this bloody fix to come out, and then I did, and then I played it, and I finished it. But I waited too long for a fix that should have been fixed.
So you found you weren't as into it, I'm guessing.
I seen so many forums trying to fix this, have a solution for this one bug, and there was hundreds of people with this issue. So on that sort of scale of people with the issue, it should have been fixed donkeys ago, not 3 months later. And that was the one issue I had with the story, was you get stuck halfway through if you haven't got all the updates. Mm-hmm. Other than that, the storyline itself, where it goes, he makes friends, he makes enemies, he kills, he survives, he saves. I did really like that, and I liked a lot of the sieges where you could bust through the gate and kill as many people as you want, and that was really great. I really did love that, and the only issue I had was the glitches that ruined the game and the repetitiveness. It did get very repetitive towards the end. But that's okay. I can forgive that because of how great the story was in general.
Yeah, I think when it comes to really any game, there's only so much you can do. So I find it easier to forgive if, in terms of the gameplay, things get a little bit repetitive because, there's only so many ways you can do things. But the thing I think helped as well is how well a lot of the battles were designed. The siege battle, I did have a lot of fun with. I personally really enjoy the stealth side of things, but having that where I guess you have to experience both sides of things, I think that added a lot. I know earlier I was saying about how it really helps to have your own flair that you can add to things, do things your own way. But sometimes I think it is good to have to do one thing a certain way so that you can really appreciate both sides of the gameplay, both methods to go about things. And again, that's how I was able to say more about the gameplay, is because I experienced more of it. And yeah, the sieges were really quite fun. I greatly enjoyed them. After a while, as you said, they do get a bit repetitive, and when you're using the same method of doing things, a lot of the layouts of the sieges I found were very similar. It was like walking the same path, just different visuals. But again, I can't be mad at that, I can't bring myself to take that away from it.
Great game otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. I also, one of the things I did enjoy about it is, as we've said earlier, you make a lot of friendships, but you can sort of add romance into it. You know,
Yeah.
that was a.
Yeah.
You sound like you're getting a bit horny.
Not quite. I made one mistake. I got a story for everyone. Now, I'm not homophobic.
That is a terrible way to start a sentence.
I'm not homophobic. I'm none of that. Love is love.
It's just like, I'm not racist, but
in video games, I try and live video games as I would live my life in general. And
I think we all do.
I'm a straight white male, right? So I'll play a straight white male in video games. And anyway, it was me, my kid, my missus. We were sitting in the lounge room, and I was playing this game. And there was one option. I was playing male Eivor. There was one option to sleep with a male. I clicked no. Well, I thought I clicked no.
I was going to say, you thought you clicked no.
I thought I clicked no. By God, was that a conversation with the missus later when she was asking me about my sexuality. She watched my game character sleep with another man. She was horrified. I was horrified. I thought I clicked no. I'm 95% sure I clicked no. It's not something I'd ever do on purpose.
It's what I can understand. Again, living it the way you would live in that position. Fair enough.
It took me an hour to convince her I'm still straight, that I still want only her. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good thing my daughter's young. She doesn't understand. Otherwise, she might be saying that, Daddy likes boys, and that's just not true.
Anyway.
So that's the story for you guys.
The other thing I quite liked about it, and this comes to the story as well, the dialogue options. Now, so I know that's a weird transition talking about accidentally sleeping with a dude to, dialogue options. But I think that added a lot of character to it. Even though you had a limited amount of ways you can do things, I think it was another way to live it the way you would do it. Like, with certain characters, you can react differently to how you would react to others. And you could be that friendly one, the understanding side, or you could be the screw you type, if you want to be. And I found throughout the story, I used all the different options, like the different personality options, multiple times. And that was a good thing to have control over.
As I said, like I try to play my games as I would live my life. So a lot of the dialogue options were a very personal thing for me. I'd look at the options, what I'm given, what's presented to me, and so if I in life would give a nasty response, as Eivor I'd give a nasty response, and it worked out well for me. And things people I'd kill were people I didn't like, or if I had to kill them, I'd do it honorably because I liked that person. And I tried to live it as I'd live my life, and that was what forced my hand for some of the decisions I made during the game. But all the options ended up with great outcomes, whether it was a good option or a bad option. The outcome was still a decent outcome with the multiple outcomes you could receive.
Yeah. I think that's most of what we can say about the story. You get the slight variations, and depending on how you acted through the game, you would get a different ending, and that was a really nice detail as well. That you could do it the way you wanted to do it, and depending on how you do it, things will change. Not drastically, but just enough. With all that about the story said, I'm about to hand you over to Blaze to talk a bit about historical accuracy. Now, Blaze is quite into the Viking culture. He knows a lot about it, a lot about Norse mythology even, which they follow. So, I'll hand you over to Blaze.
So this game, I felt followed the historical accuracy very well. A lot of how they did things, how they talked about their gods, how they went about different ways was very, very accurate, and a lot of the references to the gods were very correct. When they say things like, he talks in Loki's tongue. Loki's a god of mischief, so he's talking mischief. He's talking like Loki
a deceiver.
would. And it is very accurate within that. The only inaccuracies would be who kills the certain people, that sort of thing. Like it's, obviously Eivor was not a real person, so he didn't really kill, either the Boneless or any of that sort of people, and that's okay. That's okay. We can forgive that because that's part of the game.
It's an artistic license.
Yeah, that's it. And I was very pleased as someone who follows the culture very closely, lives the lifestyle as close as I can. I was very happy with the historical accuracy within the game. It just, I can't say much more other than that. Like it just was very accurate, as Ubisoft usually is very accurate with their Assassin's Creed games. Lately they've added some things that aren't accurate, like being able to ride a wolf. You never do that in real life.
You could ride a wolf?
Yeah, you could. You go to the Ubisoft, not Ubisoft. You know how you spend Helix credits and you get them different armor sets?
Oh.
Yeah, you could get a wolf.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And just different things like that, like the fantasy things, and I can forgive that. A lot of people don't forgive that. I can forgive that for the fact that the rest of it is pretty historically accurate, and like when it comes to how they spoke and how they handled themselves, the emotions they showed was just, it's all depicted as having been very much like that.
So tell us a little bit more about the cultural accuracies, because you know quite a lot about the culture.
It was, it's hard to say because we can't go back and live in their culture, but things like the way they did their feast. You remember when you get the bell, you can ring the bell and you have a big feast?
I never actually had a feast there, but I knew it was an option.
Worth it because it gives you like a 25% boost in health for a start, and then when you upgrade the rest of your housing, it adds up. So I think I'm currently at, like, it gives a 75% boost to my health, a 50% to my defense, like that sort of thing. Definitely worth doing. So like when they'd feast, and the fact that if you found an open barrel of mead, he'd have a couple of sips and then dunk his head, like that sort of thing was very accurate because that's the sort of thing they would do.
I actually never had him dunk his head. He never did that for me. He only ever scooped it with his hand.
Yeah, if you do it like 4 or 5 times, eventually you just...
Okay, that would explain it. I only ever really did it once or twice.
Yeah. See, I'm that sort of person. If I see a barrel of wine or mead, like, I'd sit there and I'd keep doing it, see if my character could get drunk. And he does. He does get drunk. The screen goes all fuzzy.
The screen goes a little bit wavy. He does it after one drink. So apparently, Eivor is a lightweight.
No. After you do it 5 or 6 times, you can barely see. Like, he's a lightweight. But they used to drink stronger alcohol back then. Like, our can of beer, I read somewhere that our can of beer is, like, say it's a 1 standard drink for us, so say 4% alcohol. If the Vikings made it back then, it'd be about 12 to 20% alcohol in that same amount of drink. So their drinks were a lot stronger then.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Plus, you said they would leave it open where it would probably ferment a lot more.
Yeah.
If it's out in the sun.
Like, Vikings used to drink mead. They'd leave it out in the sun so it got warm because it would, all the smells, what do you call that?
Aroma?
Yeah, the aroma. I think it starts with F. But anyway, it would the aroma would just spit out this beautiful aroma of smells, and that's what they enjoyed, and then it would taste even better. You don't want to boil your mead, and that's a little tip for you. So if you ever buy mead, I drink mead quite regularly. If you ever buy mead, I'm gonna go down and get a bottle later now. If you ever buy mead, don't chuck it on the stove and boil it, but leave it on a windowsill next to the sun on a hot day, and then drink it. Oh, it's better than drinking it straight out of the bottle. Like it's beautiful. And that's what they would do.
And that brings into another, well, when it comes to detail, if you go to a place where it's snowy, they still had the mead left out there, but you could see the snow around the rim of it. It looked cold.
Yeah.
So it sort of, it didn't just look normal. It was just a nice detail scene. It looked a bit icy in that. I quite liked that detail.
I can't. There's not really much.
Talk quite a bit about the stone cairns and meditation.
Yeah. The stone cairns. My facts are probably might be a little incorrect. Because I was just doing research on it before, and they used it to mark different astral points. They used it to mark buried goods. They would use it to mark deceased people when they buried them. If they couldn't get them out to sea. My view of the stone cairns that you can do in the game was I always thought that it was to show peace, balance, and prosperity, because that's what I got told by someone else who follows the culture. But when I googled it to do a little bit of my own research afterwards, it never came up with anything like that, so I feel like my fact was a little misinformed there, but it still does. You still got to have patience to build a decent stone cairn, because you got to have that balance.
Yeah,
keep it standing. Going from small to big to small. It's
and quite recently I built my own stone cairn, and it really did. It was really calming.
It is a great form of meditation, because you really got to sit there and you're not thinking about anything else except, is that rock going to fall or not?
And you're balancing things, and you feel the air, the breeze. It is very calming. And they also do meditate a lot, and right before sieges,
they would meditate.
Yeah, you see them bend down and meditate, which I loved.
They would sit there and they would calm themselves, especially if they were a berserker, because they would calm themselves before having the berserker brew, which was usually just magic mushrooms, or they had a argillic mushrooms, I think it's pronounced, which was just what's that word? I think it starts with H.
What are you talking about?
When you take something and
hallucination.
Hallucinate. It is a hallucinogenic drug, and they would take that, and that's what berserkers would take before they go into battle. So
berserkers get mad lit.
They really would, and that's why they call them shield biters, because they'd be anxious, but they'd want to kill something, so they'd be biting their shield to stop their chattering teeth, and that's,
I didn't know about that.
And it was a nice touch when they added that there with the meditation and the fact that there was one set of missions where you could go take the berserker brew and fight someone, and it was very accurate from what I know and what we all should know about the culture anyway. There was one part where if you kill all the lost Drenga, which I believe you didn't do.
No, I did not kill all of them. I only killed, I think, one, maybe two.
If you killed all the lost Drenga, as like a side quest, you got to see Ragnar's last days, because this game is based after King Ragnar's siege of Paris and after his death. And you go to the exact location, because England's a very accurate representation, so you actually go to the exact location he died, and you can see how it played out. And from history books, it played out almost exactly the way it's scripted out from history, which I was very happy with. He dropped into a pit of snakes, at this exact location, and it was just great. was just great, the historical accuracy. They clearly had a lot of people who knew their stuff backing it and building it with them, you know. I'm going to leave it there because there's not much else I can say about it, but it did please me, the accuracy.
Yeah, definitely. So we've spoken about the main details that we will always talk about, but now I would like to mention a few notes that I've written throughout the game. Some of these I was writing within 10 minutes of starting it. For example, when I first experienced the climbing, straight away I noticed how smooth it was. Towards the end, sometimes I'd have a few times where he'd get stuck in the right and then he'd just climb a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right, and then the climbing wasn't perfect in all the locations, but in quite a lot of them it felt really good. It was smooth and sort of you got a lot of fun out of it like you would. And yeah, so I took that note right at the start, and then I had some which I took towards the end of the game. So we'll go into a little bit. These will be a bit higgledy-piggledy, for what you'd say. It will be a bit random, but it's a few that I wanted to mention throughout. First one I'd like to mention, being able to pat the dogs and cats. That always makes the game better for me. I'm big on animals. I love animals. At home we have multiple cats and multiple dogs, so having them in the game and being able to pat them is always really cool. So for example, when you go to pat a cat, it will actually jump in your arms and you'll see it nuzzle Eivor and it will purr.
I did like that aspect. That was very because going back to what I just said, I'd finished on a lot of Norsemen had cats on their boats because Freya blessed cats with the gift of luck. So a lot of cats bring luck to the household, and that's why they have cats on their boats. And there was one mission, one little world mission,
mystery, yeah.
Yeah,
I was about to say.
Little world event you can do that you find a nice white cat, and then it's actually on your boat for the rest of the game after that.
Which was a really good detail for me. The next thing, it's another mystery that you come across near your settlement, where you have to go and rescue a wolf. And I think in it you can choose his name, even. I couldn't remember all of the options, but the one was Wolfgar.
I went with the Wolfgar.
And so having that, every time you go back to your settlement after him, Eivor will not only greet him, but will greet him excitedly. The same way you'd... Yeah, the same way you'd treat your dog. It's like, hello, how are you? That sort of thing. The only thing I found disappointing, though, you can't pat the Wolfgar.
Yeah, that was a bit...
He is the only one you can't pat, and that was really disappointing for me. But as the way that Eivor will greet him, and will greet him excitedly, I really love that detail. And yes, like they love their animals, as you said, and it's sort of the same for us now. A lot of people will love their animals as family, and throughout the game you see them basically treating them as family.
Yeah, and that's who they were as a culture as well. They love their animals. Because they believe their gods would smite them if they did. You know, Freya would be disappointed if you treated the animals badly. They still killed to eat, but not mercilessly like they would.
And hunting, I think, was a big thing too, wasn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Well, they had to. They couldn't go and buy their food.
But yeah, so I did like seeing some of those variations, and as I've said before, I'm not as knowledgeable on the culture, but seeing some of it, and then I've talked about the game with Blaze away from the mic many times now, and when I'd say about details I noticed, he'd say, oh yeah, that was fairly accurate, or that sort of thing, which it sort of became educational for me. I learnt quite a bit about the Viking culture through the game, and that's a really great thing to me. Next, I've got a couple bigger notes, so to speak, longer notes. One of the first ones is I felt genuine emotion for some of the characters quite a bit. You can get attached to some of the characters in a certain respect. So I don't want to spoil anything, of course. I do my very best not to spoil, even for older games, games that came out 6 years ago even, because I know how much I hate spoilers. And if anyone, listens to my podcast and then they say, oh, this sounds like a game I'd want to play, I try not to spoil it so that they can experience it for themselves. So I won't really get into spoilers about it, but as I said, you can get quite attached to some of the characters. You enjoy talking with them, some of them will have a great sense of humour. They're that jokey sort of person. And as someone who values humour, I feel especially good towards them, that sort of thing. And, whether you make friends who you consider quite well, or enemies who are designed to hate them, you really feel how you should towards them. And so that's what I found I quite enjoyed about it was to enjoy being around it, and you get either happy when that character does a certain thing, like you've got a few characters throughout it will come to live with you in your settlement, and then they'll be around there. That was quite good to me, and as well as that, the way when you formed bonds with them as Eivor, that they genuinely act as friends. Eivor thinks highly of them, they think highly of him. It's a good thing to see, and it's a good way to see the relationships evolve throughout the game. So, yeah, that was a note I really wanted to mention because I quite respected the way that they designed the characters well enough that you could feel that way about them. So very well done on that part. The next part which sort of plays into that is you will see how these characters interact with one another, and that will often change how you see them. And a lot of games wouldn't do that quite as well. You would only base opinions formed on how they react to you, how they interact with your character. And in some games, you don't really know much about how they act when you're not there. You don't get a feel for that. Whereas this game, you will see them interacting with other characters and it will change how you view them, even if just a little bit. And once you learn more about their history, about other things that, the things that go on around them, it's designed quite well that when you interact with that character, you get a feel that they're also existing outside of where you are. It makes them feel a bit more real in a sense, because you know where they are when they're not on screen. Even though it's a game character, so when they're not on screen, they technically don't exist. It still does it quite well, and it blurs that just enough to make it feel more genuine. So I think that was very well done. Now we have a slight glitch. And once I got the game, it I think has had 2 bug fixes released recently, but during the time I was playing it, there were a couple little bugs which I, again, won't let them change my opinion of it, but there were things that I noticed, and sometimes I'd find them quite funny, really. In one of them, during a certain alliance, one of the characters, again, I won't say many names if I can help it, but one of the characters, his voice would play, but the character model, his eyes would just flutter shut and his mouth won't move. But the voice goes, and then as soon as the voice finishes playing, he opens his eyes again and then starts moving normally. And I got a bit of a laugh out of that. I thought it looks so weird having the thing just freeze while he's talking. And then on part of the mission, right after you finish talking to them and you have to run with them, he sort of just stood still and slid forward without his character model moving. And it was one where I kind of liked the glitch because it was funny to me. And again, yeah, you got to realize that it's PlayStation 4, but the game was built for PlayStation 5, so glitches are just a fact that comes along with the game. But it ran surprisingly smooth without it. And that was quite well admired. I admired that it was working better than you'd expect for, a next gen console to current gen. It was done well, and that's not an easy thing to do. So very much good props to Ubisoft for being able to make it backwards compatible like that. Very, very well done. I think I used the wrong term there. I think it's forwards compatible technically. It's a bit of both. But again, very, very well done for it. I think that is pretty much going to end today's episode. We've gone into just about everything we can, and yeah, thank you, Blaze, for joining us.
It's no worries. Thank you for having me on. I love coming on and talking about these games. I love video games myself, so there's a lot of things I like to get off my chest about video games, and it's nice to get on and talk to a bunch of people that I know will listen.
Yeah, I always enjoy having you on. They're some of my favourite episodes, and this is one I've been looking forward to for quite a while now. And finally, thank you, listener, for being here with us today. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and if you haven't played Assassin's Creed Valhalla yet, I hope this becomes a reason for you to play it.
Please like and follow Jeremy on Instagram. You won't regret it.
I post a lot of good content there. I even post stream content. I'm not just someone who plays games. I would love to see you there. And I would love to see you here again as well. Thank you, and we are out.
See you later.